All right, what's going on? Oil and gas startup. We got Safety Radar. We got Garrison and Matt on the show today. Garrison, we were just talking about how we got introduced through Chrissy, and you were telling me, and then I interrupted you. I was like, no, this is good podcast content. We'll record it. So how did you know Chrissy?
Yeah.
And Chrissy, for everyone, she was at Capital Factory formerly. She just left recently, and I think she started her own thing, huh?
Yeah, I think she's working for a startup out of California now, but bunch of connections to Chrissy and her husband, a guy named Will Edwards, who founded an aerospace company. Yeah. But I think the most direct connection is through Capital Factory. I'm an Army Reserve Innovation Officer. So one of the things that I do, 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year, is go out and scout new technologies that may have some applicability in the defense sector.
Yeah.
And Chrissy used to run their federal programs. So she'd go out, look for new tech companies that they could bring into Capital Factory. And she was showing me some of them. And then she was like, hey, I talked with Collin from Digital Wildcatters. Don't know if you heard of it. I'm like, yeah, I've heard of it. Listen.
That's awesome.
So yeah, that's how she got us linked up.
I've known Will for, I don't know, probably a little over a year now. And I got introduced to Will through one of his VCs, and Will and I hit it off, and he knew about DW as well when I met him. And anyways, I found out that they were doing a lot of their rocket testing for Firehawk out in Midland, and Midland's my hometown. And so, I just thought that was cool. And so Will and I became friends, and then, he's getting some pushback from some local politicians out in West Texas. And, I was dunking on them on LinkedIn, and I had Firehawks back. And anyways, Chrissy, I can't remember what it was specifically, but Chrissy had posted something or commented on one of Firehawks posts. And I clicked on her profile, saw her background, and I was like, hey, Chrissy, looks like we have some mutual friends. And I said, like, Will. And I didn't put two and two together that they had the same last name. She's like, yeah, Will's my husband. And I just thought that was funny. I was like, oh, yeah, if I would have taken 2 seconds, I probably could have mapped that out. But yeah, they're great. I love them.
I have one more cool tie there. And this is maybe my favorite one. I got to officiate their wedding.
Oh, really?
So, no, I will just caveat this with, I have zero credentials to do something like that, but they were like, no, it's a friends and family thing. I'm like, well, okay, I don't think I can pronounce you man and wife under any legal circumstances, but I am happy to do this. And they're like, yeah, we already got the paper.
Look, I hate the credential system, and I think if anything, like, you can officiate a wedding
exactly.
Yeah, I can do that for sure. Like, I talk a lot and host things. I could officiate a wedding.
Great sidekick. Yeah.
So
put it on your list.
So let's talk about y'all's company real quick. First, Garrison, you live in Tulsa. Already told us a little bit about your military experience, and then before we were on the podcast, homie, you spent time in Iraq, and so that's great. Matt, you're in Denver.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, cool. You from Denver originally?
No, actually from Oklahoma.
Oh, so where at?
Worked in oil and gas up there. Went to school, undergrad in Norman.
Okay.
Moved up to Tulsa to work for Apache.
Okay.
And then worked for a couple EMPs up there. Garrison and I worked together in Tulsa, and then work took me to Denver, and
okay, cool.
I kind of landed there that way.
Did you go to school for engineering at OU or
environmental science?
Environmental science.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then did work for Apache. So oil and gas guy. Oklahoma's cooler than Denver. So I got to dock some points from you for living in Denver, but
Amen.
It's a hot topic.
It's got its pros and cons to both.
Our CFO just moved from Houston to Denver, and he's got 2 young daughters. He's like, yeah, we walked to the 4th of July parade and we didn't sweat. And he's like, it was so nice. And so, Denver's got good things, but I gotta bash you just because.
Gotta do it.
Fair enough. Garrison gives me a hard time about it all the time.
Come back. So give me the 40,000 foot view on what the company is and what you guys do.
Yeah. Well, so maybe a good place to start is with that military background. So, as you know, I'm an Army guy. Went to West Point for undergrad, and then deployed with the 1st Cavalry Division. I'm an artillery officer. The home of the artillery is Fort Sill in Oklahoma. And when we were getting ready for deployment, this was like 2011 timeframe, but when we were getting ready for deployment, in the weeks leading up to that deployment, like literally like 6 weeks, we lost multiple people to training accidents. And when you actually went back and look, I mean, these are people who were getting killed. Like, we're going out for training. We're prepping equipment for deployment. People are getting killed on the job. And you just, when you go to West Point and you're thinking like, okay, I'm going to go to combat, you expect that you're going to have casualties in a war zone. You don't expect to have casualties from training accidents and, somebody loading equipment that they weren't trained to load, and then they fall off and they pass away. I mean, this was just stuff that when you look at it after the fact, you're like, there's got to be a better way to manage these risks. So that started the gears turning. Then you actually go overseas and you see, okay, people are getting injured, killed in combat, but they're also getting injured and killed by accidents. This is like the ever-present enemy. The way that we manage those risks in the Army is primarily paper. It's these packets, these risk management worksheets. You can't do a lot with that from a training perspective, from a processing perspective. It's just like, the stack of paper grows, you tuck it away, you don't go back and check it until something bad has happened. When I moved into the energy industry, Matt and I were working together for an E&P at the time. We saw the same thing. So, it's either, maybe it's fillable PDFs, maybe there are some hazard collection forms, but there's really no way to get that information through the bottleneck of the human, determine signal from noise, and figure out what are the causal factors, what are the things that we need to train people on. So that's where Matt and I started talking about this initially years ago. We're like, there's got to be a better way for us to do this. I ended up moving into the pipeline industry, and we saw the same thing. And at that point, I was in grad school at the time. I was going to University of Pennsylvania, and I called up Matt. I was like, Matt, we have got to spend some time figuring out how to do this better. And so we started designing a system. We came up, we say really high level, we say we've got three things that we do. The first is we collect information in a way AI can use it. So whether that's, we have an app, so everybody in the workforce can have the reporting tools in their pocket, the training tools in their pocket, go straight to the cell phone. That's the first thing. But if they already have a reporting system, we can just tap into the information that they're already collecting. So if your people are already trained, we'll just connect into that via API, your data lake, different things like that. First thing that we do is collect. Second thing we do is analyze. And with the analysis, we've trained, we take different AI models and we put them together in a proprietary platform that we've built, where the AI is working through, trained off of the company safety perspective. So it thinks like a safety person, does assessment for actual severity, potential severity, causal factors, potential serious injury and fatality exposure. And it assesses that, pulls out all of those risk signatures. And you can see that in real time because, it's able to process these reports in seconds where it would take a person minutes to hours to do some of this processing. So those are the first two things. The last thing is just the communication piece, live risk dashboard, alerting based on different thresholds, causes, as these different factors, some will co-vary together. So one factor, servicing of energized equipment, that in the historical data, it correlates with a higher exposure to potential serious injury and fatality. If that moves with some other factors, your exposure risk goes up really fast. So the AI is looking for those, extracting those, triggering alerts to the operations team and safety team. So that's really what we do at high level.
I love it. One thing that kind of stood out to me as you're talking about just past experiences is deaths in the military. One overseas in combat areas, like that wasn't even a thought to me that, hey, there's deaths that aren't combat related. But I mean, it makes perfect sense. I mean, you're in a dangerous industrial type environment with heavy equipment and things of this nature. And so it's like, I don't know why I've never thought of that, but yeah it's like I could see a lot of accidents happening. And then, anytime you hear, you see a headline of someone dying on base or on a training ground in the United States, just like how, like you always ask, it's like, how does that stuff happen?
Yeah.
And I mean, look, they're accidents for a reason, right? But when I look at like my experience in the oil and gas industry, you go out there, you pencil whip a JSA, and I was in the oil field before stop cards existed, and then they introduced them. I'm like, guys, this is like the most virtue signaling bullshit. Like, this is not actually, like, I'd sit there. like they'd be like, you have to turn in, 2 stop cards a day. And like you sit there and like you make up shit to turn something in. Right. And so anyways, there's a lot of, there's actually a lot, and I've been wanting to go on this rant for a long time, but there's a lot in safety culture that's just theater.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
doesn't actually make a meaningful impact. My second month on a rig, my motor man got sucked into the drawworks on our drilling rig, and he's very fortunate. Just ripped off of his fingers, didn't sever his head, and I remember like impact gloves had just come out right after that. Like impact gloves aren't going to keep you from getting your fingers ripped off, but you know what stopped that from happening? Lockout tag out. And we didn't lockout tag out. I didn't even know what lockout tag out was. And it's like if you focus on like the real inputs that actually matter.
Yeah.
And so that you're not in that position in the first place. But love that we get to talk about AI. I'm an AI nerd, and we've been building some pretty intricate retrieval augmented generation over here at DW as well. And like I think about HSC a lot, and like what you guys are building, because if you look at it, just say that you're an oil and gas company, big oil and gas company out in the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, you've got decades worth of historical information, right?
Yep.
That's probably like not really useful to you in the state that it is, because it would take you hours, days, months to, 1, go find it, to 2, make any kind of correlation out of any of the information. But to your point with AI, it's like you do that really fucking quick.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, going back over, looking at causes, taking those causes and applying the potential severity of the events to them. Now you're able to look and say, okay, what are our causes that are going to have the highest severity, the highest PSIF exposure? And I mean, most of these companies, to your point, we find with our customers, they've got decades worth of data, and they've been collecting it. And they're like, look, we've been collecting it. It's for compliance, but really there was an energy company that said, we feel like we are the Google of information in the energy industry. We have all of this stuff, but we've been waiting for this golden age where we can use that and extract all the trends. We can go back and process hundreds of thousands, and have processed hundreds of thousands of these reports. And you can see for that company, we have a data scientist on the team who's very good at going through, running the statistical correlations and saying, these are the things for this time frame. We're starting to see potential severity ramp up. That means your actual severity is going to ramp up. We go back and track that over, a year, and we actually look, we can see the potential severity starts to rise, then the actual severity of events starts to rise. So it's like
interesting.
A lot of capability that people don't realize. And it's actually, it's really easy to implement. Companies have way more data than they think they do. They just don't realize.
No. Yeah. I mean, it's like I was talking to a company a couple days ago, and they're like, well, we have all these documents going back 30 years. Like, it has a short shelf life because it's not valuable to us a few years later, but like what you're telling us is that it can be valuable.
100%.
Like, yeah. And so, when you look at it, running all this regression analysis and, looking at, hey, we had these 5 safety incidents happen. What was the common ground between those? So doing that, are you guys doing any, like what you were just describing there of talking about the risk increasing? It sounds like you guys are doing some prediction modeling in that as well.
And we kind of stay away from predictive a little bit, but proactive. We can look at that and say what risks are rising, and how much more likely are you to have these
that's
types
a better
of
word.
accidents.
You can't predict an incident happening, right? But being proactive about, hey, look, their risk exposure seems to be trending up.
And a great example of how we can use that data, the regression data, to use that in a proactive manner is the JSA, right? If you submit a digital JSA and we see, here's your work activities for the day, here's the work plan, and look back across the data set and say, here's all the accidents that have happened. You're doing this type of work. Hey, you're 4 times more likely to have these types of exposures today on location. And if you're the frontline person, you're getting that in real time.
It's like, hey, the smashed fingers happen when you're nippling up the BOP, and the last 5 incidents that you've had have happened during that activity. Right so there. That's interesting.
Just to that point, Collin, one of the other things, you just mentioned smashed fingers, BOP, nippling up. Like those are some jargon terms. Our industry is jargon heavy. I mean, you know, you're on a rig, everything's got a name that is not in a textbook.
Yeah. And some of them you can't even say on the show. So.
I was going to say, I can think of a few of them. Oh man, are you sure we can't say? You can believe them, right?
We can say whatever the hell we want to say. But there's some risk of getting canceled.
That's right. Yeah, quick way to turn off customers. Okay, all right, we won't say those. You know, I think there's a benefit to AI being built by energy people in the energy industry. When you think about where a lot of this stuff is coming from, and even looking at like the traditional safety systems out there, the form collection systems and things like that, they're still coming from the coast, which is great. But if, you know, this AI that's supposed to analyze risk in the energy industry is being built in San Francisco or Palo Alto or Washington State, there's a disconnect. And that's one of the reasons that we felt like, you know, we looked at potentially headquartering on the coast. We've been, I've lived in the Mid-Con for over a decade. Matt was born and raised there. We've worked in energy for over a decade. I mean, I guess, gosh, well over a decade for Matt. But when you look at like what our customers want and the jargon and the understanding that has to go along with these analyses, it's better to have that coming from our industry. And that's something that we really pride ourselves in, is having the energy background.
I mean, look, Silicon Valley, even if they wanted to, they can't build for this industry because they don't understand the nuance. They don't have the domain expertise, right? Yeah. They can contribute to the technology, right? Big time. Lots of smart people out there that can contribute to it. I mean, with AI that we're building, I mean, we're standing on, you know, the backs of shoulders of big tech. And but I've always had a big belief that whether it's energy or any other, you know, technical industry, the solutions are built by people that actually understand the problems from being boots on the ground and have the domain expertise, and even just like cultural alignment with companies. You know, that's a huge one. To, you know, just being able to sit across from the table and they say nipple up, and you get some woke motherfucker from Seattle and they're like, what, did they just say nipple?
I don't think you're allowed to call it that. Oh, man, that is what they call it. Every near miss is going to have. That's so true.
So for you guys, you know, using the app, let's talk about kind of workflows, user experience. Like who's actually using this? Obviously, like your in-office safety managers are field hands using it as well? Is that the goal? Tell me about that.
Yeah. Right now, so the reporting, a lot of it is about the company's reporting culture. So if the field is reporting near misses, good catches, JSAs, incidents, like all of the things that most good companies are tracking, like all of the customers that we work with, they're tracking that stuff. In the energy industry, we track that stuff. Whether they're reporting that over the app or not, when we work with them, we tap into that data. So the field is using it whether they know it or not. It's really light touch on the field. Yeah. That said, there are companies who've gone, you know what, our current reporting system sucks. We've got to switch over to something mobile friendly. We took a lot of time to build our reporting software so that they can get into it on their phone, easy, speech to text, like all of the stuff that makes it easy for somebody in the field to use.
Big chunky buttons. Like someone looks at it and they're like, that's really poor. You're like, but it's so easy to use. It's just intuitive.
The point is to be big and simple.
You know, it's funny. I was actually just talking to my team about this. I did this 3-month course on HBS online, and they did this entire case study on Amazon's data science team and all their A/B testing on their website. Because like if you look at Amazon's website, I mean, like it looks pretty shitty, right?
Sure.
Like, it's just like,
and
it looks old, but that thing is so fucking optimized. It's insane how much time and effort their data science team has put into that. And so it's not always about like looking pretty. It's about what works. And
Yeah, that's what we say too. And you know, we really focused on making it easy for the field team to use if they're doing their reporting. But if they're already trained on something, they can keep using that. At the end of the day, the AI is going to analyze what it's given, the modules that we've trained. We ingest their safety manuals, their operations manuals, and their risk matrices, all of the stuff that the safety person would look at to understand what's come across the system. That's what we're going to use to extract the correlations. They can, like, whether it's the ops team, the safety team, there are a couple different sort of consumers of that data. The executive team likes to see, especially depending on the type of tracking that we're showing them, so the trending around like potential severity, especially when you start talking about like equipment hazards and things like that. Like, okay, do we need to replace this particular type of equipment? Is this a company-wide push to retrain on something? The executives like to see that stuff. So we do a lot of the dashboard building for them eventually. The end user of the dashboard is typically the safety team, the ops team, and the executive team. But we're starting to get to a point where we're building outputs like weekly reports for the supervisor, or to your point, like when a company, if they have a work order system, especially we work with some energy manufacturers, like equipment manufacturers. In a manufacturing operation, you've got a work order system. The AI can go back, we can extract all of those past correlations, and then as those new jobs are coming into the system, the AI can do the same assessment and go, oh, this work is about to be done. These are the spots where we've seen these types of incidents in the past. These are actually the most dangerous steps in the process. What's your forward-looking risk curve look like? Like, what of the work to be done in the next week, where are we going to be seeing our risk go? And that can be fed right back to the field so they can see you're about to do something. You're about to do the most dangerous job in the company.
Yeah, just making them aware. The most dangerous job on the oil field is lifting tubulars up to the rig floor. And like every safety meeting, like I would make sure I tell every single crew that I worked with that, like, just make them aware, like, guys, this is the most dangerous activity. So stay out of line of fire, out of the strike zone, and just making people aware and cognizant. And so, having essentially a bot that feeds that to you and says, hey, look, you're about to do this activity. It's dangerous. So watch out for, A, B, and C.
And, especially, in the rig scenario where you have a large workforce there and you can communicate that easily, it makes a lot of sense to kind of verbally do that, but also like lone worker scenarios. If you're a pumper, you're going out on location, you don't really know the location. If you're submitting your JSA in, you can see, hey, someone had these types of accidents on these types of facilities. It gives them a heads up that they're not going to get.
That actually reminds me of this really sad story. This is actually my wife's coworker's husband goes out to a facility and dies from H2S. Yeah. And wife drives out there with her 2 kids because she hadn't heard from them. She gets out of the car. She dies as well. Thank God the kids, for whatever reason, stayed in the car and didn't get out. But I think like so many safety incidents come from just not like we get in a groove, right? Yep. And we do this every day and you don't think about it. We get comfortable. Yeah. And so just simply being alerted to, hey, look, this, you have increased risk exposure on this. It's like, okay, well, that's on top of mind now. So I'm going to be thinking about it. And so, I think this is kind of going back to how we started talking about safety, is that there's a lot of stuff out there that's safety theater that doesn't matter, but it's about like, hey, what's the actual real risk that's going on out here, and focusing on the inputs instead of trying to address the outputs. Like when I talk about addressing outputs, like it's so funny, man. Like these wells that I owned up in Tulsa, it's backwoods oil and gas. I could be out there. And mind you, when I started roughnecking in 2010, I mean, this is like drilling for RSP, legit company. We'd be out there, shorts, no shirt, flip flops, no hard hat. Like that's how we used to roughneck, right? And I'd own these wells, and like there's no overhead stuff. I'd be out there with like, no hard hat, not wearing any coveralls, and I post on LinkedIn. People are like, "Where's your PPE?" Like, what the fuck do I need a hard hat for? It's like a bird gonna shit on my head or something. Like, that's not the risk here. Like, the risk could be like, hey, I could fucking pinch my finger in this pump jack or something. So anyways, it's about focusing on like what the actual real risk of that operation is, and being able to assess historically of what's happened.
The complacency issue is interesting too. We had a customer that came to us, and they're kind of showing us through some of their safety data. And they're like, you always think it's the green hard hats, the new people on site, high risk. And like we see high risk there, and then it troughs. And then about 1.5 years, 2 years out, it pops back up because they've become complacent at that point. and they're showing us some of their stats.
Yeah,
going,
you can see it.
That's actually
really
really
interesting.
that's actually really interesting. Yeah. I think green hats are funny because like, usually if you're getting hurt, it's because someone tells you to do something and you don't know any better.
Yes.
And so you do it. But also like the other side of it is like green hats can tend to be super aware because you're scared of everything. And so you stay away from it. And so that was me at least.
That was me too.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'll tell you what, Collin, that was me in Iraq too. I remember going on our first patrol and it's like, you've got all of these things that they tell you to look out for at West Point. You train on this stuff. You go to National Training Center, you train on it again. It's like, look out for a pile of rocks by the side of the road. They hide IEDs in there. I remember going out of the gate for the first time on our patrol. It's my platoon. We're all out there. We're all looking around. We got a bunch of combat vets. It was my first deployment. And like 50 meters outside the gate, I see this pile of rocks and I'm like, whoa, pull over, stop. And I literally had my sergeant jumps on the line and he's like, hey, sir, they just stack those out here. And I'm like, wait, no. Nobody just stacks rocks.
Did they make fun of you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's like a year. Yeah. You did that on the first day. You get to hear about that for another year. Yeah. Oh, man.
100%. So, real quick before we wrap up here, are you guys oil and gas specific? Are you energy agnostic? Are you working across any? Because it sounds like you're doing some manufacturing as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the technology, and to me, doesn't sound like it's specific to oil and gas, that it can be deployed in any energy company.
For sure. So we're energy guys. I mean, most of us in the company, we have a few folks and especially some advisors who come from industries like defense and aerospace, manufacturing, but we're energy guys. So we started in this industry. That's our beachhead. Many of the models that we've built, we've trained off of, we're training them for the customers. We have a lot of energy customers, but we just picked up a construction customer. We're talking with some pretty notable aerospace companies and scoping up a pilot that'll be a big one. So we are out there. The framework supply, the models are very easy to tweak for different for different industries, but within energy right now, what we say is, we are an energy safety company with ambitions. So we're looking, and within that too,
ambitions.
yeah, with ambitions, yeah. And I would say within that too, it's utilities as well. And I mean, when you think about like the green energy transition, we don't get to achieve that unless we keep our people safe in the process. So it's both. I mean, it's renewable energy, hydrogen pipelines, all of this stuff still applies. And at the end of the day, we just train the model for the company's specific use case.
Got you.
Yeah.
Cool.
And one thing too to mention is the support we've gotten from just oil and gas industry in general. Garrison mentioned we're headquartered in Tulsa. Our first round of non-dilutive funding came from an energy startup incubator in Tulsa, Rose Rock Bridge.
Yeah.
Some of our first customers came directly
They're
from
great.
the funders of
Rose
that
Rock's
program.
awesome. That crew is phenomenal.
Yeah. So the industry's just been really supportive of what we're doing.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, no, it's all very cool stuff. I think just what AI is enabling in historic data sets and augmenting operations is super cool. So this is pretty fascinating to me. If anyone wants to find y'all's company, where do they find y'all at? What's the website?
www.safetyradar.com.
You guys, I'm jealous. You guys got the .com.
Yeah. That was one of the priorities when we were picking our name. We had like 50, and we had to have the .com.
Yeah. All right, guys. Would highly recommend linking up with this crew. Sounds like they're working on some really cool stuff. So safetyradar.com. Make sure to share this episode with a friend as always, and we will catch you guys on the next episode. Thank you, guys.